black. I'm the black sheep, the real black sheep. I'm the black sheep, the real black sheep.
We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That was the preamble to the United States Constitution, and I was forced to remember that shit, against my will, might I add, in the 5th grade. And how things look today in America with Donald Trump, impeachment, Democrats versus Republicans, why the milkshake machine's always down. It got me thinking, is the government really important? I mean, seriously, what if we were to get rid of all notions of the state, government, laws, all that shit? Will we see some sort of socialist utopia crop up and usher us into the next level of human evolution, enlightenment, where we're all pulling together for the good of mankind? Or will we be thrust into some weird Mad Max style shit where we use the severed nipples of our fallen enemies as currency because, you know, they fit in your pocket and they dry up like potato chips. So before we start this journey into
social anthropology,
I have to set some ground rules. I know there are many differing opinions on what time humans showed up on the globe and how they showed up on the globe and whether or not we're even on the globe. I'm sticking to the current scientific consensus only. If I went down all these rabbit holes, this video would go on forever and I really don't know shit. And honestly, you probably shouldn't even be watching this. Also, we're going to be diving deep into some topics that deal with the structuring society, a society that I also live in and affects both you and me directly. I'm not saying I'm here as some objective arbiter of truth. We all have some perspective we hold, right? So with that out the way, I think it's best we get started from the beginning. So let's go back. Like way back. Homo sapiens first popped up in the fossil records about 2.5 million years ago. Our early ancestors lived a nomadic lifestyle, meaning there were groups of hunter-gatherers roaming from region to region, following the herds as they went about their business, you know, just eating and shit. This was known as the Paleolithic era, which lasted from about 2.5 million years ago to about 12,000 years ago. That is, until one day, a bunch of gangsters realized that instead of running around chasing zebras, they could live off the land by harvesting vegetables so they could whip up some pies in the kitchen and kidnap baby goats in their sleep to raise as their own until they develop a Stockholm syndrome so severe that it completely changed the genetic makeup of them, making them more docile and borderline eager to die. At least, you know, that's how I assume domestication works. This was known as the Neolithic era, and it started around 10,000 BC in the Fertile Crescent, or as I like to call it, Africa, Black Power, and early Mesopotamia. The dawn of agriculture and domestication, early humans now didn't have to work as hard to get the food they need to survive. So now we were, for the first time in human history, living with an excess of resources, balling. This had massive ramifications on our social structures. We were now living in more densely populated areas, and we were freed up to do other things, a process known as specialization. We could now focus our attention on things that didn't directly affect our chances of survival, you know, like painting, creating jewelry, and working on that fire aspect. I mean, writing. In fact, this was when we first started seeing things like pottery and even arrows show up, which we apparently invented with the sole purpose of killing other people with, since animal fossil records from the time lack the telltale arrow sign marks, but human fossils, so let's just say drive-bys aren't a new thing. Black power? Since farmers invested a bunch of time and energy in cultivating specific areas of land, they had gotten attached to them. After all, they would spend their whole lives devoted to this work. This led to the concept of ownership. Now, hold on to your butt cheeks, because this is where shit starts getting interesting. The idea of ownership may be an easy thing for us to grab, for us modern humans to grasp. Hell, ask anybody who knows a 2-year-old. But that simple veneer masks some pretty deep implications. For example, in today's society, the norm is to get a house, find your wife or husband, settle down, raise kids. But for our early ancestors, it wasn't that simple. Their social hierarchy was more tribal, and they didn't just settle down in the traditional sense. In fact, most of them didn't really settle down at all, since they had to follow their food sources as they migrated. Owning a permanent house just wasn't only a foreign concept, it was downright impractical. So early humans mostly were polygamous as well, and they didn't have the Maury show back then to tell them, you know, who's the baby daddy. So, you know, this meant that your kids weren't just your kids. Everyone in the tribe was expected to help with the development and growth of the child. Everyone shared everything. Any weak links that could severely threaten the survival of the tribe were weeded out, and whether it be from an unsuccessful hunt or from an injured party member, you kind of had to be all in. This would be like if your neighbor knocked on your door and told you that they needed you to take their son to martial arts class, and then went in your room with your wife and husband and proceeded to. Now armed with the concept of ownership, things started to get complicated. It used to be that the food you ate came from the hunt that everyone helped out in some way to get, so everyone ate. Now people were growing their own food on their own land and wanted to stay that way. It's not a coincidence that this is also the first time we start seeing major conflicts and wars pop up in the records as well. After all, how else are you gonna keep people from stealing your shit, right? I mean, I guess you can have some sort of set of rules that everyone agrees to, like no stealing and no killing, and everyone would have to agree to those rules from birth, so it's probably best to write them down and make sure everyone knows them. You also probably would need some people that can enforce those rules if they were broken, maybe some sort of, rule enforcement men or something. You also need to feed them, and since they're dedicating the time that they would otherwise be spending making their own food, protecting yours, they probably would need a place to stay. I guess you could set up some kind of pod or pool of resources where people in the community can pitch in for those who have been protecting them, and they can call them something like, I don't know, taxes. And actually what's interesting is some of the most extensive written records we have of ancient civilizations have been their tax records. So I think you see where I'm going here. With the advent of specialization in modern society came the advent of governance and the social contract. After all, we all live in a society, as the meme goes, You have to do what you got to do in a society or you risk being ostracized or even taken out completely. All a government is the system or group of people governing an organized community. It's just the real world mechanism in which we use to enforce the social contract that we all agree to. All societies work in the same basic principle, whether it be from one person making all the decisions on how the broader populace should live, or a select few at the top making those decisions, or the masses making those decisions. You need a set of rules that everyone agrees to follow if y'all are going to coexist together, Now, I started off this video reciting the preamble to the Constitution, and as I said before, I had to memorize it back in the 5th grade, and I pretty much remember it, still to this day. And what really sticks out to me about it, though, is the first 3 words, we the people. Think about that. The first 3 words written in the Constitution is we the people, not I the dictator or we the chosen few. It's we the people. Side note, I know when it was written, it didn't have my people in mind. I get that. But like I said at the beginning, again, 30-minute video, so just ride with me, right? I know that politics, government, and bureaucracy are all things that most of us couldn't give less of a fuck about. We're all busy trying to live our lives. We're busy working hard, trying to raise a family, and it's hard to find time to learn who your representative is and stay informed on latest political news. Trust me, I promise I understand. But ask yourself this: do you work hard? Do you obey the laws? Do you contribute to society? Pay taxes? Are you struggling to make ends meet? Then what is society really doing for you? Think about it. Like, this isn't just a one-way street. In most other relationships, and yes, there's a relationship between you and society. You don't just allow shit to happen, right? Like, so for example, if your spouse were to talk crazy, stay out all, hours of the night, didn't call you, was cheat or even beat on you, you probably wouldn't stand for it. Well, unless... Nah, you would try and change the situation or leave or something. You would not just carry on like everything's all right and talking about how you live in your best life. You would raise hell about it, right? But yet we choose not to raise hell about the unfairness of the rules to the game we're forced to play. Because remember, you signed this social contract from birth or whenever you decided to become a citizen of the United States. We choose not to participate in the one thing that's just as important, if not more important, than going to work every day. And that's the political system, especially if you're perfectly fine with just going to work every day, which, side note, is completely fine. If you just want to go to work, that's fine. If you don't want to, have dreams of opening your own business, then it's the laws and system you choose to follow that has broader, more lasting impact on your lives than anything else does. And, yes, going to work's important, but it's also important to make sure that job's paying you a livable wage. A private business has no obligations to you, but the government, we the people, we do. We work hard for our kids, but we don't participate in setting up the rules of the game that we're raising them to play, even though most of us would agree that the rules are rigged against us. So what kind of society you want to live in? The kind where even if you decide to flip burgers for the rest of your life, you can still have free time to socialize with friends, family, and when the time comes to retire, be able to retire with a dignified life? Or would you rather have the society where even if you were working multiple jobs and and struggling your hardest, you still can't afford that dentist trip because, it's too expensive. Now, this is just a basic crash course into some of these themes. I recommend checking out some of the other resources, links in the description. I'm also leaving some links to some independent news sources that I watched in case you want to, some other people to check out. If you were digging that, make sure you like, share, subscribe to my channel. And with that, I'm out, man.
These days don't be nothing but hell around me. I live it every day. Better watch how you talk when you talk about me. Like they don't know my pain. Seems like everybody be lost around me, and they can't find a way. I was blind for a while, but now I can see. It ain't so far away.